All right, guys. So today, for today's training, we're going to be talking about the in-home. And the first thing I want to do as we jump into this training today is I want to jump into the in-home section of the knowledge library. I was talking to a couple of agents, pointing out a couple of tools available in the knowledge library. And, surprisingly, they weren't aware of it. And these are agents that did go through the new agent orientation. So what it lets me know is that, one, either we're not paying attention to the level that we need to pay attention, or two, it's just so much information that sometimes we overlook certain things. I'm going to lean towards number two, opposed to number one. But for the sake of this call, what I want to touch on today, and I want to get a couple people like Princess and Gio, and maybe Sam, maybe Prince, to help me out with this. I'll ask them to chime in the process of this conversation. But is the in-home section of the knowledge library. So check out all of the knowledge library, but specifically in the in-home section, we kind of have the in-home process outline. For those of you that don't have it saved, we have our in-home helpline. We have a few agents that are on this in-home helpline. And if there's anybody that wants to sign up to be a part of this in-home helpline, it's just being available so that way, if an agent is in the house, they need help, they can call, get an answer, or get something clarified, get pointed in the right direction of what product to be able to place that client with, so that way they could protect that family. So we're always looking for more volunteers. I think there's probably 4 or 5 of us on call right now. And please, when you're using this line, make sure you're only using this when you're in the home with the client asking, and you need some help with underwriting. If you're just kind of, doing some research and studying, and you have a question, reach out to your direct upline, direct coach with those type of questions. This is to be reserved for, hey, I'm with a client. This is urgent, and so that way we can better help you. But what I wanted to go over today was the client worksheet, and a couple of things that, how to go through the client worksheet to maximize your ability to be able to help protect that family. And so when you click on that link for the client worksheet, it opens up to this, and you can print this, take it with you if you're going out to meet with the client, or print it, keep it with you if you're doing a telesale appointment or a virtual appointment. And so to me, this is not just a data collection sheet. This is like ammunition that I can use in order to help protect that family. And what I mean, I'm going to explain kind of how I go through it. I'm going to have some of these other top producers explain some of the things they highlight and utilize in this sheet to be able to maximize their ability in the house to protect the client. So I'm not sure, Latoya, what you're asking there, but we could drop this into the WhatsApp group, or you could just go to the knowledge library and print it out if that's what you're asking, how to access it. And if you guys have any questions as we're going through, drop them in the chat, just like Latoya just did. We'll be happy to answer them. So one of the things that I learned, and then Gio, you could chime in on this, or Princess, you could chime in on this. Somebody's calling the in-home helpline right now. Hopefully they're in a home. One of you guys that's not talking, that's on there, can answer that real quick and see. Unless it's somebody on the call that's testing if the number works. It does work if it's you. But one of the things I learned to make the in-home very simple, it's kind of break it down into 3 steps, right? Step 1 is to tell the client who you are and what you do, okay? And then step 2 is to tell them what you're going to do, okay? And then step 3 is to do it, okay? So let me repeat that. Step 1, tell the client who you are and what you do. Step 2, tell them what you're going to do today with them. And then step 3 is to do it. Okay, very nice and simple, 3 steps. And so the way that plays out for me, and I run a lot of mortgage protection appointments, so I'll ask probably Princess to kind of share how she sets up her appointments, because I know she does a lot of internet life lead appointments. But for me, when I meet with the client, I'm sharing with them my driver's license and my insurance license. And I'm letting them know, hey, as you see here on this insurance license, I'm licensed by the state of Georgia. I've been licensed since May of 2017, and I mainly help clients protect their mortgage. I also do life insurance, like burial policies, regular term life policies, children's policies, and I do retirement protection, retirement planning as well. But my main focus is mortgage protection, and that's what I'm here to help you with today. I work with about 20 different insurance companies to be able to help my clients find the most affordable plan to meet their needs, make sure that if they die or get sick, the mortgage is not a burden to them if they're sick, or to their family if they die. And I'm local. You see my driver's license. I'm right here in Loganville. So if you're ever in the neighborhood, swing on by, come see me, drop off the pie, whatever the case may be. And so with doing that, right, I'm letting them know who I am, that I'm local. I'm building that connection with the client. I'm also letting them know I'm licensed by the state. And with mortgage protection, I'll say, hey, I'm licensed just like your real estate agent, because they obviously bought a house. I'm also licensed just like your mortgage broker, because they had to get a loan. So they've dealt with those two people. So what I'm doing is I'm breaking down the barriers of trust, so that way any walls that might be built up, they understand, and now they're thinking of me like their real estate agent or their mortgage broker, and they're making that connection. So it's building that trust and that professional relationship. So that's before I even get to the client worksheet. So that's me telling them who I am and what I do. And then, when it comes to telling them what I'm going to do, I just explained to them real quick, in our appointment today, what I'm going to do is 4 things. I'm going to ask you some health questions, because these plans are non-medical, and to be able to determine what you qualify for, I just need to know what your health looks like, so I can find the company that can best underwrite you and give you the best rates. I'm going to ask you some financial questions to figure out exactly what we need to protect, and what we need to put in place for you and your family. And then I'm going to share a couple of options for us to review based on those questions that I ask you on the health side and financially what you're looking to protect. And then we're going to pick an option, and the 4th thing we'll do is submit a request to the insurance company to see if we can get you qualified for the coverage. And to do that, we're going to need your driver's license. You're going to need your social. That's how they verify your medical history. They verify your identity with your driver's license. And then we're going to need to know who they're going to pay, your beneficiary, and they're going to want to know how you're going to pay. And they'll take either a check-in or a savings account number, so you'll need to round in an account number. And then I ask them, does that make sense? And any questions? Can we proceed? And I get the agreement, and then I move forward, and then I do exactly what I just explained to them. And that's when I jump to my client worksheet. So that's how I set up my appointments. Again, tell them who I am, what I do, tell them what we're going to do, get their agreement, and then I proceed to do it. And I do it using the client worksheet. So before I jump into that, I wanted to see if anybody else like Gio or Princess wanted to add anything to how you set up your appointments based on what I said so far.
Well, mine is very similar, Jermaine. The only thing that I've been, I guess, kind of revisiting now, and I'd say in the last couple of weeks, I've kind of changed something. So, of course, the client worksheet, financial inventory, communicating that you do have to, in fact, qualify for coverage, and we're going to do an application to be sure that we're able to gain coverage. But one thing that I've added to that, just because I personally just feel like I'm losing a whole lot of time with individuals searching for items after, when I'm in the process of finalizing information, birth dates, stuff like that. What I've been doing is I'll explain to them while I'm grabbing numbers, while I'm finding numbers that'll work for you, if you would grab these items for me. So while I'm doing that, they are grabbing their beneficiary information if they have more than one, if they want to make sure those birth dates are right.
Princess, you're muted.
All that talking I was doing.
No, we got the first part. You said
Yeah,
birth dates.
it was good.
Yeah, you said birth dates, and then you just went on mute. I don't know what happened.
Okay, so that they can grab the birth dates and the checking or savings information while I'm digging, so that at the point when we are physically processing the application, there's not a 5 to 10 minute delay while they gather those pieces.
Perfect. I like that. So once you've gone through the client worksheet and now you're working on putting some options together for them, you tell them ahead of time, hey, once we review these options, we're going to pick one and apply. So go ahead, grab your driver's license and your social and then your banking information, just so we have that ready. Is that how you do it? Okay, perfect. I like that. And you tell them up front as well, like, hey, we'll need this information. So when you get to it the second time, it's just saying, hey, go grab the information I already told you need it. Right.
Right. Exactly.
Perfect. I think that's so important to, and for somebody that's new, and I guess I could get some input here, Ashley, since you were just speaking, were you nervous? Because you're one of the newest agents we have. I think you've been here, 9 months now? Is that right?
It was 7. I started in August.
August, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So were you nervous initially at kind of telling individuals that, hey, I'm gonna need your social, I'm gonna need your driver's license, I'm gonna need your banking information? Was that something a little nerve-wracking for you?
I didn't struggle with the social, but I did with the banking. And I think that that's where I got so much pushback, was because I was uncomfortable asking for it. So they were uncomfortable giving it to me. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because if you're confident in asking, they're confident in giving it to you. And if you just make it matter of fact, like, hey, this is how business is done, this is what's needed. This is not demeaning at all, but your clients are kind of like your kids, right? For those of you that have kids, if you set the structure, they'll go along with the structure. But if you have no structure, then they'll run all over you. And so, if you set that up front and set that expectation and get their agreement to be able to move forward, just like I just set up for you, you're going to find out more often than not, you'll be able to get through the process nice and easy. And also, you'll find out up front if there's any objections, because with me telling them up front that I need, driver's license, social, beneficiary information, and the banking information, if they're uncomfortable with any of that, that's the time that they'll bring it up, because I'm going to say, any questions? Do I have your permission to move forward? Things like those, to be able to make sure that they're comfortable. And then when I get to it, you'll see, like in my application process, all I'm saying is, hey, okay, this is the area where we need to put in your driver's license number. What's your driver's license number? And like Princess says, by that time, they already have that information. So it's just handing it over to me. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take you guys kind of through the client worksheet, each section. And this is going to benefit those of you that are especially new. Some of you that's been here for a while, this might be helpful as well. So if not, you might be able to help a new person with this. So each one of these sections is not just to collect the information. This is to really help you either close a sale or underwrite the policy. So this first section is where you collect the customer information, but more importantly, you're identifying a need that client has in this section. So I know Gio does a good job with this. I was going to ask him to kind of chime in here if he's on here. You here, Gio?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. Can you just share a little bit, and I'll kind of piggyback on it, kind of how you utilize this section here to help identify the needs, some of the questions that you ask as you're collecting this information?
Yeah, so the first part for me is really crucial, and it was a lot of appointments where I had to spend a lot of time, an hour, hour and a half, to come to find out that they were either just looking, that they're not serious, or they're not necessarily looking to give me the information. And so that first part of my appointment, I let them know what we're going to go over here in the financial inventory in the client worksheet. And so I find out first, the reason that, what got them looking into life insurance. And it's just general for me. Depending on the appointment, I obviously specify it to mortgage protection or final expense. Then I start asking questions as to, like, well, I came a day too late, you died this morning. And I think that is important too, to make sure that you get comfortable with mentioning or saying the word dying. And if you are uncomfortable, can you raise your hand if you're uncomfortable saying the word dying? Say dying. Say die. just keep repeating it to yourself,
I like
right?
to
And
say,
you'll get comfortable.
I'll tell
You'll get
myself, dude, I like to say passed away. So
Yeah.
that's
So
I'm still
for
getting.
me, it was always, well, if God forbid something happens, right? Or like being very cautious about that. And, Dominic Rogers and also Brian Mendenhall talks about being very direct with people, and you got to put them in a position of being uncomfortable to be able to talk about these things. Now, I do usually say, hey, I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the dying part. But I'm also going to talk positive and go over a few of the things that you could potentially qualify if you don't necessarily get to a tragedy like dying, right? And so after we talk and find out the reason that they need the insurance, I go, got it. So now I know why I'm here. So let's just take a few steps back. And I want to mention this, Jermaine, because we just went over that here in the training in Boca. Someone had gone into a whole appointment, and at the end, the client didn't necessarily qualify. So he was looking how to find out he was looking how to specifically pointers on how to pivot, right? And it was, long story short, the client got denied and he needed to go over on one of the graded options. At that point, the client was not open-minded. And then one of the statements that the client said, he's like, well, I want to shop around. And then one of the questions that Frank asked them was, what happened when you showed them the client, the credibility sheet? And he's like, well, I didn't show that. So it's very important to make sure that you guys have these tools where, number one, you let them know, once I find out, I go, got it, now I know the reason that I'm here. So let's take a few steps back. So here's who I am. I show them my credentials, and these are the companies that I represent, right? So my job here today, because I don't work for these companies, I need to make sure that I can ask enough questions to see which company is going to be the best fit for you. Okay, now I don't give you the approval, so we're going to have to submit an application today requesting that approval. In that application, they're going to ask you the normal things, right? Your name, social security number, bank and routing information from where they're going to get the premiums from on a monthly basis. Okay. And then I shake my head and then I go, Bob, Mary, can I ask you the questions? And they go just like Avery. They go, yeah. Okay. And so at that point, I'll, bring out the client worksheet, and I started at the top. Very important that you guys are learning how to get better in the home. You have to make sure that you ask every single question. When you call the helpline, there can be a question as in like, hey, Ashley, so can you repeat that medication? Ashley, what's the medication for? Right? Because we may be on the road, we may be with a client, and so we can't necessarily be looking that medication up for you at that point. So if you don't know, and if they don't know, Google is going to be your best friend, right? Google is going to be your best friend. You have to Google it, guys. And so please make sure that at that point, you have everything filled out here in this client worksheet. So sorry, Jermaine, just to get back to that first part, I want to make sure that I have all that information up front, because from that very first part, and this is a second part to the structure, right? So if in the structure, for whatever reason, there is any type of pushback, whether it be they don't want to give me social, they don't want to give me bank information, obviously, as we found out, I'm just going to get up and leave, right? But if we come to the point of budget, right? I get a lot of agents that are like, well, they told me the budget is this, right? And I'm like, well, how do you know, right? Like, why are you limiting yourself? And on a side note, I when we used to post numbers and stuff like that, I used to see people that, agents that will post like, 500 AP, 600 AP, 400 AP, and it's like, I knew exactly what that was. You guys are limiting yourself to the budget that they give you, right? Don't let them control that. You are in control of it, right? Because I can tell, because I don't like to spend money. So I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to spend, but nobody likes to spend money, right? So also don't be too concerned about spending their money, right? You obviously have the main point, put the main point up front, I'm sorry, which is helping the client, helping the family. But here's where you find out if that's going to fit in the budget. So I ask for their name, date of birth, age, and then I go right into the budget, right? I go, hey, all right, so let's go into the financial questions. How much do you bring in per month? And also be comfortable about asking for that information, okay? Because you already said that you're gonna ask personal, financial, and medical questions to see which one is gonna be the best fit, okay? And so when you ask for that, like, don't be too weird about it either. I think Ashley just mentioned this too. So like if you go, well, so how much do you make per month? No, you just got to go right into the point, right? So, hey, how much do you bring in per month, every single month, right? And then they go, well, gross or net? I'm like, whatever gets deposited. I don't even know which one is which. Just whatever you get deposited, right? So then at that point you go, got it. So out of that money coming in, how much money goes out of the door and responsibilities, rent, mortgage, car payments, and you name them all, so they can include all that in there, right? Insurance, medications, food, entertainment, anything, that goes out of the door. And so if they go, well, I'm bringing $1,000 per month, right? And they go, well, my expenses, I overspent, right? I go over $1,200. Then I stop. Then I go, Bob, got it. So listen, we're talking about insurance here. So you are looking to make sure that you get life insurance. So if we find something that is gonna that a company that are gonna approve you, most of our clients can find that coverage within $50 to $100 per month. Are you gonna be okay with that? I mean, you're not making enough money here. And so you got to put yourself in that position where you take control even at that point. And it's okay if that person can't afford it, right? I mean, unfortunately, you can't change that. There's just very few things that you can control. And so one is your attitude in the home, right? And then two, just making sure that you ask enough questions, but you can control their income. If they don't have any income and you push for an application to go through for $50 a month, that's a chargeback ready to happen, guys. So now, when you ask enough questions and you find, let's just look at the opposite of that, right? And they have enough funds, they have $4,000 coming in and they spend $2,000 in the responsibilities. Then I go, got it. So you're spending $2,000 and then the rest, and I ask this every single home, I go, got it. And then the rest, you kind of just leave it in the bank, put it in the savings account, right? And then they go, yeah. And I go, perfect. Now, see, I put that in the back of my mind, right? Because there is the budget. So when they go, well, I can't afford this, then I go, Bob, hold on a second. Let me go back to your financials here. So you're bringing this much per month, you're spending this much. Did anything change from 15 minutes ago to now? Like, did you add any type of expense? Right? Because you can afford it. So what's the issue here? That makes sense. So that first part for me is really, really, really important, because that's going to determine budget questioning or pushback on if they can afford it or not. You're muted, but
Thought I was on mute. I was saying that's powerful, and you said so many gems that I want to just touch on real quick, because I think they're going to help a lot of people. Let's go to what you just said. They can afford it. So the fact that you believe they can afford it is that goes back to the same thing Ashley said. Like, if you say something confidently, they'll respond to you confidently. If you say timidly, they'll respond to you timidly. So you don't go in there thinking, man, they might not be able to afford this, right? And I stress that because some agents do. Some agents, or the other side of it is you'll go in there with your budget. And I had this conversation with an agent last week. I'm like, hey, just because you can't afford $200 a month because you're just getting started and you're getting, doesn't mean they can't, right? Because, based on their situation and their budget, they can. And so one of the key things is, knowing that I learned this from Sean Mike. He's like, man, if they've got a cell phone, they can afford insurance. And pretty much everybody we talk to has a cell phone, because that's how we book the appointment with them. So believe in that, knowing that it's just a matter of finding where their budget is. And then the other thing that you said too was most of my clients. That's a phrase that I use in so many different ways. And
I learned it from you.
Say again? Oh, you learned that?
I learned that from you, yeah.
So, sometimes it might be like, hey, Bob, most of my clients will say to me, hey, Jermaine, I've got $50 a month, $80 a month, $100 a month to be able to put towards my insurance. What would that number be if you had to put a number on it, right? And that way I'm kind of putting them in that mindset that, hey, this is what everybody does. They want to be like everybody else, and then they go along with it. And then you also, that phrase, which ties directly into this first section that we're talking about, is if I was a day late and you died yesterday, talk to me about what that looks like, right? And this goes into finding out who the beneficiary. I would, as much as possible, I would never say, hey, Gio, who's your beneficiary? There's no depth to that. But if I were to say, Gio, God forbid I was a day late and you passed away yesterday, who's picking up the pieces and trying to figure out how to bury you? Who's trying to figure out how they're going to pay this mortgage? And what does that look like for them? Can you paint me that picture? That's a depth question that gets to the heart of the matter. And forgive the imagery here, but that's opening up the wound, and in some cases pouring salt in it, so that way we can identify where's the pain that we need to go ahead and get, sutured and taken care of and patched up, whatever you want to say. That's how you utilize this first section. So I wouldn't leave that section without utilizing some of these phrases that we just talked about. Don't just collect information. What's your age? What's your date of birth? Where do you live? What's your income? But ask questions like that to really identify the need, because I think in most cases, the sale is made in this section right here. The rest of this is just figuring out who we're going to place them with. But this is really where the sale is made. When you pause here, and Michael Sandman talked to us a couple weeks ago about how he used to put a timer, I think for like 7 minutes is what he said. And he wouldn't leave the section until he felt like he had a really good understanding of what that need is. And get them to paint you that picture, not just, just want to make sure my daughter has some money. No, what does that look like? What if she doesn't have the money? And does she have the money now? Like if I was late and you died yesterday, what is she doing today? And that gives you opportunities to uncover anything that might be an objection, right? And I asked this question I think it was this weekend, but I asked this to the client. I said it the same way. If I was a day late and you had died, who's the person responsible for this mortgage, and what are they going to do to afford it? And she said, my daughter. And I was like, okay, so is she in the position financially where she can afford this mortgage if you had died yesterday? And she said, no, that's why I'm talking to you. I was like, perfect. That's why I'm here to help you. So just things like that will help you uncover. But that's the purpose of this section. And that's what I wanted to highlight on this first section. As you're collecting their information, you're asking questions. And if I'm new or not, I'm looking for 3 to 5 questions that I can ask in this section to help make sure that why is developed, and that it's a deep why, it's a deep pain, it's a deep problem that I can then show them how I can solve. Does that make sense, everybody? Anybody have questions on that? Princess, you want to touch on that?
Yes, I just wanted to add something. So in regards to what Gio was just talking about with being direct, and we just talked about that like last week, I think, or maybe the week before. So this has been something that I've always kind of slowly, comfortably kind of worked on. But my last 2 weeks in the field, I made the commitment that I would be more comfortable with being absolutely direct. And I'm for certain that it's the reason why I was able to create the numbers that I was able to create in those 2 weeks. But 2 families particularly. So I had a husband walk out on me, first time ever. Like I've never had that happen. Like he totally left the home. And the reason behind it was because he was uncomfortable, and he took what I was saying personally. The situation at hand was that he had just gained coverage for himself and his wife, and he had communicated that to me before I had made the appointment. But when I got there, I learned that he had just gained this, and he basically felt he had just done this and he was doing a great thing, and he had accomplished this. And here I come, tearing that away from him. So it made him a little bit uncomfortable, but the situation was they had a waiting period on the policies. So my focus was, you've done this, you've allocated coverage, but what happens if one of you guys pass away before this year is up? And that was kind of where we began to dive in, because they had no idea that there was in fact a waiting period on the policy. But he was so upset that, he just walked out. And then I began to talk with the wife. And she was like, look, we're doing this today. I really don't care what he's got going on, but we weren't aware and we need to fix it. So I was able to write her policy on that day. He, however, still remained on the outside of the home. And then later on, when I was leaving, I said, you've done a great thing. I am simply here just to educate and to help you through formalizing a better product for you. So didn't mean to step on your toes. If I did, my goal is just to make sure you're protected before I leave here. And he says, no worries. And I left. And then 4 days later, he calls me and says, come write my policy so that we can fix it. So that was family number one. And I was uncomfortable because I was saying some things that I wasn't used to saying. I was pushing harder than I'm used to pushing, but it absolutely worked. And then the second experience this past week was an individual who was over the phone. So we started with the Zoom, we had some trouble there, and we finalized over phone. So she says to me, yeah, I'm not okay with giving you my information over the phone. I'm just not comfortable, and we had already talked about that prior on the Zoom. Of course we had some interruptions, but now I'm in a space where, okay, we've got 45 minutes in already, so how are we going to fix this? So I say to her, okay, so are you comfortable with knowing, with the possibility of you passing away while you get comfortable? And she was like, excuse me? And then I repeated it.
You swallowed first, right?
Right. And I was like, when she said, excuse me, I almost, simmered off and just left it alone. But I repeated it and I said, are you comfortable with the possibility of you passing away while you get comfortable with sharing your account information with me? And she says, no, hold on. So, I mean, the push is the push. Like, we absolutely have a job to do, period. And we just have to stand in that.
Yeah, 100%. And you bring up a good point, which you guys probably have all heard this, but you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's something that grows. And I know, Princess, for you, which it was for me, it grew out of frustration. It grew out of, having those moments where I walked away without making a deal. And I was like, man, I could have done a better job. I should have said this. I should have said that. And just determined that, you know what, I'm going to say it going forward. And you become more comfortable being uncomfortable. And when, Sean Mike likes to say, when people are uncomfortable, they make decisions to get protected. Because they're not going to, if they're comfortable, they're not going to make a decision. So you have to help them be uncomfortable because of the fact that we need to get them protected. And so that's being direct. And you learn that through the process of going through and having those frustrations, and then getting on calls like these and hearing scenarios like that, where you got to ask those questions, because, people like to procrastinate, and our job is to help them not do that as well. So let me jump here to this section real quick. And then if you have some questions, drop them in the chat, because we're going to have a couple minutes for Q&A. But the medical section is also key, right? One of the key things is this form has the main medical conditions on here that you want to ask about. But what it doesn't have that you should also inquire about is the time frame. So if you ask, hey, Bob, have you ever had a heart attack? And he says yes, don't just circle yes and keep going. Now you have to get some more details, such as, okay, when did you have that heart attack? How long ago? And get as specific and close to the month as possible for that year. And then what are you being treated for or with, prescription wise for that condition? So if there's ever a yes to any of these, Especially like diabetes, you got to get, okay, when were you first diagnosed? What are you being treated with? What prescriptions are you on? If it's cancer, same thing. When were you diagnosed? What was the treatment? How long was the treatment? Because that matters with cancer. Did they get treated for a year, 2 years? So, when you look at the underwriting grid, So make sure you're asking additional details about these questions. Any surgeries, when were they? What were they for? And then any other conditions. One of the key things I say here, and anybody else can chime in, Geo, Princess, Prince, whomever. One of the key things I say here is I set them up right before I jump into the questions. So I'll say, for example, I'm looking at Avery right now on the video screen. So I'll say, hey, Avery, my job is I work for you. I don't work for the insurance company. My job is to get you approved. So these insurance companies, they're going to look at your medical history, anything that you've ever been prescribed, whether you took it or not, anything that you've ever been treated for, no matter how short of a term, how major, how simple it is, it's on there, it's coded, and they're looking at that to determine whether or not you qualify. My job as your field underwriter is to help you get qualified. I have a good understanding of the underwriting guides. And if there's something I don't understand, I've got a team of experts I could give a call to make sure we can get you qualified. But do me a favor, be as open and as honest as you can with me, because that's going to make my job easier so I can help you get approved. Does that make sense? And I get their agreement. And what I'm trying to eliminate there is them thinking, well, if I don't tell them this, maybe they won't see it, and maybe they could try, maybe it might get approved. I don't know. And I don't want them to hide anything. I need them to be as detailed as possible, because I'm only trying to show them plan options for plans that we can get them qualified, that I'm 99% sure we're going to get this approved either instantly or within 2 to 3 days. And so that's my preamble to going through the medical questions, and then I'll run through and I'm asking all these questions you see here. I'm asking about time frames, as much details as possible. And I'll always say, hey, anything else that we might have forgotten about, think real quick and let me know. Because, sometimes they'll have that one prescription that they forgot about, and you got to jog their memory, especially if it's donepezil. Then they'll definitely forget that they're taking that one. That one's with dementia, for those of you that don't know, which means they definitely would have forgotten that. So, and I've had that happen before. Like, I've had a client that's like, we put her through with Prosperity, and it shows up that, it's going to be graded. I'm like, is there something you forgot about? And then she's like, oh, well, yeah, there is one. And then she gets it. And I'm like, oh, so, okay, you've got dementia or Alzheimer's. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to go with AIG. But either way, that's how I go through this medical section. Anything else that you guys would add, Geo, Princess?
Yeah, so I think that also that's really good to be very thorough on what you just said, and also let them know that once you find any type of condition, you want to ask all those questions. But I also feel that it's very important to understand too that if they are healthy, you can't necessarily let them know, because if someone tells you, well, I don't take anything, right? And then human nature, right, is going to say, oh, so you're pretty healthy then. Oh, you look good, right? Just to give them comfort, just to be that friendly with the client. These are some of the things that, some of us will probably say in the home. Remember, we're not there to make them feel good, right? We're also there to help them understand that even though they may afford life insurance, they may want it, they may not qualify for it. And you're not there to give them that approval. So you can't necessarily give them that assurance that they're going to get insurance today. So Mark Mead talks about taking that cookie from them, right? You got to take it away from them. If they are healthy, usually what I go, got it. So you are, call it, 60 years of age, and they go, no, I'm in no medication at all. I go, gotcha. Ms. Mary, good thing that you're doing this today, because one thing that we know for sure is that today is the youngest that you'll ever be and the healthiest that you'll ever be, correct? And they go, yeah. And they'll tell you, they go, yep, anything can happen tomorrow. You just never know. And then you go, you're 100% right. I usually say this, I know that is not true, right? But I usually create, at the Hall of Fame meeting, they talked about creating urgency. This is part of creating urgency, right? And I usually go, you're just one medication away from being uninsurable. And I say that, right, because that might just be the case, because if they're diagnosed with congestive heart failure, they may just be uninsurable, right? If they, for whatever reason, I remember, Jermaine, there was one guy, you helped me with an annuity follow-up. His mom had dementia, and his doctor, no medications at all, healthy as a horse, actually, making a lot of money in Coral Springs. He was making about, I think it was either 30 or 40,000 a month. And Jermaine and I were following up with with an annuity. So obviously he couldn't qualify for insurance. And he's like, yep, the only thing is that my doctor said that because my mom had dementia, that I should start taking care of myself early. And they gave him the Nepiso. And he was like 40 something years of age. So it was the craziest thing, right? Unfortunately, he couldn't qualify for anything. So there again, they are one medication away from being uninsurable. And so that's the one thing that I will say here in this part. So aside from what Jermaine said, just also understand that you got, when you get someone that's healthy, create that urgency by saying, hey, I'm glad that you're doing this today, because today is the youngest that you'll ever be and the healthiest that you'll ever be.
100%. And I think too, when we let them know, I like to say, because I've seen it. Matter of fact, I dealt with it recently with a client that was my age, 30. Well, I'm 35. He is 34. Where there was something on his medical record that he had no idea about, where he wasn't approved for a plan that he should have been approved for. So, I sometimes say, hey, you never know what these doctors are putting on your records, which is 100% true, because I've seen it time and time again, 5 years into this career. And I said, but we're going to do our best to see if we could get you qualified. Once they do the underwriting, we'll truly know. So the decision is really up to the insurance company. As much as we might like the plan, they've got to like us just the same. And that's going to take 2 to 3 days. And that's that same takeaway. So they don't think, well, hey, I'm as healthy as a horse, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And
so,
Jermaine, on that same note too, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
I've
no worries.
also gotten some clients that are like, they're so sure, right? They're like, oh, I know they're gonna approve me. I know they're gonna approve me. And so there's where your job as an underwriting comes in, because and again, you got to create that urgency, right? And you got to let them know, hey, I don't give you the approval. I don't know if you're gonna get approved. Right? We still have to submit that application to see if they approve you, right? And so you gotta let them know that it's not up to you. That's why you can't necessarily overpromise, because I don't know if you have gotten these calls, Jermaine, but I get calls and they're like, hey, we're looking at this policy, and I told her that they're going to give her the cash back and all this kind of stuff. And then I go, got it. What medications? No medications. I know they're going to get approved, right? And I'm like, gotcha. How about height and weight? You go, oh yeah, they're 5'2" and they weigh 320 pounds. I'm like, no, they're not gonna get approved, And so you have to be really, really good. What Jermaine said, filling out every single one of those fields, and never overpromise. Never, never, never let them know that you're gonna get them the insurance, because you can do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't give them the approval. I feel that was one of the things that, because I wanted to win the client's trust, I used to say that at the beginning. I'm like, I'm definitely going to be able to help you. Be confident. See, being confident doesn't necessarily mean that you got to tell them that you got to give them insurance. Be confident enough that you're there to help them, but you can promise coverage.
100%. And Andre, to your question, yes, this is a section that you would ask about DUIs and any type of criminal activity as well, in the medical section. I typically do that for my clients that are younger. I typically don't have any of my older clients that are having any cases and charges or anything like that. But you can always ask just to make sure that they qualify, because some companies, if there's felony charges, depending on the product and the age of the client, then they won't approve. DUIs definitely is also an issue as well. So, cross-check the underwriting grid, but do ask those questions. So the last thing on this I'm going to jump into, I'm just going to highlight for the sake of time, is this current life insurance section. And so always, always, always ask on this section anything that asks excuse me, anything that acts like life insurance. You have another policy or anything that acts like life insurance. And then depending on their answer, you know which way to go. The purpose here is, one, you want to identify if they have coverage, what kind of coverage they have, and you know, are they looking to replace that coverage? Are they just looking to add on to that coverage? And you want to address it if they have some up front before they bring it up and say, no, I don't need any more. So a couple ways you could do that if they do have coverage is, one, you know, obviously I always ask, okay, so when does that expire? I'm not going to assume it's a permanent whole life policy. I'm going to assume it expires. I'm going to have them have to convince me otherwise. And in most cases, I'm going to say, okay, go ahead, grab that policy. If we're talking about like life insurance, this is an internet life leads, I want to see the policy. Typically mortgage protection, I just kind of, lack of a better word right now, diminish that policy by just, allotting it for, okay, you had this before the mortgage, right? Okay, so that's your income replacement insurance. You need something to cover the loan. That way the family has life insurance to live on while the mortgage is paid off. They have a place to live. Is that correct? And I'm shaking my head and they're agreeing with me. So it's important to ask, you know, what coverage, what company, you know, how much you're paying for that, those type of questions. And another question I like to ask here too is, hey, when was the last time you reviewed that policy? Have you had the agent or the company review that with you in person or over the phone in the last 2 to 3 years? And I ask them those questions because I want to kind of make sure they're on top of it and they know what they have. And if they say, no, I haven't reviewed in a while, then that's when I dig in a little bit more deeper into those policies to make sure that, you know, either one, we're looking at being able to put them in a better position with that plan, or we know, okay, that plan is for this reason. You need this coverage that we're talking about now, you know, for whatever reason we've uncovered up top. So those are a couple of things. And I had that question about like work insurance, right? And somebody was like, well, how do you handle work insurance? And the best way to handle work insurance is, one, congratulate them. Hey, I'm glad you have that. And, you know, I'm glad your company offers that. I'm sure they match some of that for you, right? And pretty much 100% of the time it's yes. And that's exactly what I wanted to say. I was like, great. Now, because they match that, because you're a part of a group, do you understand how that works? And I'll wait for them to say yes or no. And I always try to get them to tell me opposed to me telling them. But if they don't know, then I'll educate them. I'll let them know, hey, that group policy, because you're a part of the group, you only have that policy while you're a part of the group. If you leave the group, whether they make you leave or you voluntarily leave, you no longer have that policy. Did you know that? And in most cases, they'll say yes, or they might say no. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And that's why most of my clients, going back to that phrase, want to have a policy that they own, that they could take with them no matter where they're working, and, you know, keep as long as they can. They're paying the premiums. So those are some of the things that I use to kind of make sure that I minimize that policy from work, because that's exactly how it works. And a lot of times we get these internet life leads from individuals who are either, you know, laid off and now they need insurance because they don't have any, or they retire, now they need insurance because they don't get to keep the insurance that they had when they were a part of the group. And sharing stories like those, Brian Mendenhall has a great story about his aunt. And those of you should be able to see that in the call to close training that we shared last week in the WhatsApp group. But he talked about how his aunt had work insurance, but she got cancer. They kept her job for 12 months and then they had to let go of her position. She no longer had life insurance. She died 6 months later without life insurance because she never had a policy outside of work. So being able to share stories is crucial as well, to be able to help the clients understand how important it is to have their own policies if they're bringing up that work policy. But I want to address that up front. And as you see, we haven't even gone into the plan options yet because we're strategically using this client worksheet to address the client's need. Any objections that may come up, we're bringing them up ahead of time and we're minimizing them, we're neutralizing them. So that way, when we get to options, it's just a matter of picking a plan. The need is already developed to the point where there's no question that they need it. Any objections that might prevent them from thinking they need it is already out in the air, addressed and minimized, neutralized. So now it's just a matter of, hey, which one of these plans will make the most sense to protect your daughter, Sue, make sure she's not burdened while when you die, but also making sure that financially each month you're not burdened while you're still living. And then I shut up and I'll let them pick because the table's already set and we're good to go. So I see a question here. Considering COVID-19, some people with health issues, as insurance companies taking that into account. When it comes to COVID-19, there's a COVID-19 questionnaire with most of the carriers. I think it's like 30 days. If it's within 30 days, you have to wait 30 days to apply. There's a couple companies I think that don't ask. I don't know off the top of my head, but that's the only question they have. So, all right, we're coming up on, well, we're actually at 3:02. So anything, any final words, Gio, or anybody else that you want to add to just the in-home and how to use this client worksheet to help protect families?
I wanted to add something, Jermaine.
I'm sorry, Princess, go ahead.
I'm sorry. It was just really quick in regards to medication because I encountered this for the first time. So traditionally, when we talk about meds, if someone tells me they're on two meds show up. If they tell me they're on four show up. You know, it normally is in sync, right? So this particular appointment, the individual communicated that they were taking 3 meds. However, they had their grandbaby go and get the bag, and there was a really big bag. So I just had never had that to happen before. So she's digging through and she's trying to locate the 3 while sifting through the 9 that were in there. So, you know, I, of course, you know, I say to her, hey, you know, and I was trying to gather the words to ask the question correctly. But I basically just got to it with saying, do you mind if I grab the names of all of those meds? Just so we can make sure that we have your information. And she said, no, she says, I'm not taking these meds. Like, why do you need them? And I says, well, they're going to show up on your medical report. So let's just be ahead of the curve. And she eventually said, okay. But I've never seen that before until last week.
Yeah,
so
that's called a drug bust. That's what we call a drug bust. So you gotta ask those questions, and when you set it up and let them know, hey, anything that's been prescribed, whether you took it or not, is going to show up. I need to know exactly what it is, because then we can, you know, I like to say this, and sometimes I do put notes in the agent report. By the way, those of you, there is an agent report where you can add notes. So if there's something that might be viewed in a certain light and you need it to be viewed differently, you could specify, hey, client takes this, this, and this. Or client was prescribed this, this, and this. They never took them because of XYZ reason. So that way the underwriter, you know, can take a look at those notes and take that into consideration. But yeah, you gotta do a drug bust in every house you go into. You gotta pull them out. Where's the drugs?
Would that be the same thing that you would do with a person that was prescribed medication and the doctor took them off? You know, sometimes it's not, the system doesn't take it off, but they no longer taking it. So what you would just put in a note that person is no longer taking due to, you know, doctor, whatever.
Correct. Yeah, you put anything in the note that you think will help put that prescription in the right light. And if you have specific dates, you know, it was prescribed, client took it for a week from this date to this date and has not taken it since this date, those type of things, be very specific to be able to help, you know, make sure the underwriter factors that in the right way.
Can I just share something really quick, Jermaine?
Sure.
It's really quick. So over the weekend, I think it was yesterday. No, it wasn't yesterday, but it was over the weekend sometime. I sat with this person that I have been door knocking since like since September. This was a lead you passed on to me, Jermaine. I finally got to her. She answered her door, and she was like, "I'm all set." She had already took out a policy, and it turned out to be a graded policy. And I said, I would love to sit with you if you could just get your policy document. It was late. She was like my last door knock of the evening. It was like going on 8 o'clock. So I scheduled an appointment to come back. And when I sat with her, she had open heart surgery like 13 years ago. And at the time of the open heart surgery, they put her on this heart medication that she no longer takes. Like she only took it for a couple of months after the surgery. She's no longer on it. And so with all of her other health conditions, it turned out that Prosperity would likely approve her. I didn't tell her. I said, you know, we're going to submit an application. But when I looked at the grid sheet, everything that she had gone through, Prosperity would be the one. So I'm trying to get her help to get her a level plan. And so I submitted all her information into Prosperity. And sure enough, they went all the way back and found that prescription. And of course, they're like, it has to be a modified plan. And so I called Prosperity and I told them like, hey, she hasn't used this medication in 13 years. She has her surgery 13 years ago. So Prosperity said, all she has to do is just submit the last 2 years of medical records. If she's willing to do that, we'll review it and see about approving her for a level plan. So in some case, I mean, it literally was her only option to try to get a level plan. So she's going to try to get those medical records for the past 2 years so she can get a level.
Yeah, sometimes they will do that, review it. And sometimes they ask for more than 2 years. So yeah, you can always try that approach. And then if not, then AIG will probably be the most affordable graded product. So thanks for sharing. All right, Gio, I know you wanted to mention something, so I'll let you take the last word here and wrap this up for us.
So yeah, I guess the one thing with the in-home is that you gotta make sure that you know that you're not there to ask for permission. You're there to guide them, guys. You guys gotta understand. So Princess, in your case, I mean, I'm glad that worked out for you. So like when they usually go, when I ask about the medications, I go, hey, what medications have you been prescribed? And I go, do you have a list? Do you have a box? one of those bags? They go, yeah, I have, several. I go, yeah, bring them out. And so as soon as they bring them, they start pulling out the bottles, right? I'm like, let me have them. I'll go through all of them, right? I don't ask for permission at all. I just take them, right? And so the other thing too, and I think that this is important when you presenting the options, this goes along and tagging with they're going to tell you their budget, right? One of the things that I learned from Frank, and he's sitting out here in my office, and it reminded me that what I used to do, and remember, this is where you get the smaller cells, right? I would ask them, right? If you were to get insurance, what would you say your budget is, right? And then let's say that they tell me 50. What I used to do is I used to put that 50 on the top option, right? And then I will go from 50, to $40 per month and then to $30 per month. Well, guess which one they're going to pick? They're not going to pick 50. They're going to pick the lower one, right? And so what Frank said is he said, do the total opposite. So do their budget. If there is a budget, so show that at the bottom, right? Now, the one thing that you always want to do, it's recommended that you make sure that you can put that you can put the highest amount of coverage that they can qualify for, even if they can't afford it, because you let them know that there is a possibility that they can actually qualify for that. And if for whatever reason they find some additional funds in their budget that they didn't tell you, if it's really important to them, they're going to pick whatever they want. Now, mind you, please make sure that just because they're picking the higher option doesn't mean that they can afford it. Like I always bring so I don't want to mix things up, but I always make sure that if they go, oh yeah, 150, I can definitely pay that. I go, Bob, Mary, if the AC breaks down tomorrow, your transmission goes down in the car, you need a new refrigerator next month, are you still going to be okay with paying $150 per month? And they go, I can make that work. I go, no, you're probably better off just doing the $100 per month. Would you say so? And they go, yeah, you're right. Now, I'd rather get $100 premium, right, than $150 and get a chargeback 2 months down the road, right? And so that also builds confidence in the client that you're just not there for the commission. You're there to, in fact, truly help them, right? And so those are just some of the things that I would recommend. And I think that towards the end, we can get a little bit more, in depth, on a one-on-one basis. But at the end of the day, guys, like Jermaine said, you just got to be direct with them and make sure that you're thorough with this client worksheet.
That's absolutely true. And I love the fact that you touched on that, because that was one of the questions that someone asked me about, getting the higher premiums. And it's not just, mortgage protection leads, using mortgage protection leads to get higher premiums. It's actually being willing to show the client what they can afford, because like I said, these clients, they have money. They might, present to you that they don't, but they do, and they can afford what they want to afford. I mean, anybody that we sit in front of, they're either, going out to dinner once a week unnecessarily, and they could cut out once a week, or, they're buying something extra for the grandkids, and they could put that money towards the insurance that's going to go to the grandkids. So they can find the money, and it's just knowing that they can afford it, going back to what Gio said. So guys, hope this was helpful. I don't want to take too much more.
I'm sorry, man. What on the finding budget you just said? So smokers and people that like TV, those are two things right there that they can just cut that off and pay their life insurance, man. They're paying over $200 on cable. And I usually ask smokers, I go, how much do you smoke, right? And they tell me, one per day. And I go, do you get the $5 one or the $7 one? They go, $8 nowadays. I'm like, yeah, you're right, $8. So how many? 8 times 5, that's $40 times 4. That's $160 that you can actually put towards your life insurance right there. So just a few of the things.
Absolutely, guys. So if you have any questions, you need any help with in-home, definitely reach out to whoever you're working with. But hopefully these tips were helpful with making sure that you can maximize using that client worksheet and being able to get out there and protect families, because that's what it's all about. And what I love now that we are just focusing on, hey, the numbers of families that we've helped or policies, is that's the real reason why we do this, right? And the person who helps, I saw this quote, I think it was Dominique Rogers posted this, the person who helps the most families win. And that's the bottom line. That's really how this works. So, hey, let's challenge each other. Let's challenge our clients, and let's go out and protect a bunch of families. Let's make March the best month ever that you've had individually, that we've had as an agency, as a team. So, let's keep the hammer down. Let's keep changing lives. Thanks for being on this call. And we'll have the recording out on YouTube here in probably the next 2 hours, and we'll drop it in WhatsApp and the Facebook group. So appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your dial day. Let's get it. Matter of fact, we'll keep this Zoom open. If anybody want to keep dialing, we'll keep the Zoom open. I've got a couple meetings to run into, but I'll keep it on. So if you want to stay on just so you have some accountability, feel free to stay on. I'll keep the Zoom up. I'll be in the office here for another 3-4 hours. So we'll keep this going, okay? And if any of you wants to dial, so everybody else can hear, dial live, yeah, feel free to do that as well. So appreciate you hop on. What I'm going to have to do, though, I'm going to have to end it and then restart it, so that way we could get the recording.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Jermaine.
Thanks, Jermaine. Thanks, Gio.